and we lost a child. At another point, they wanted to press me through my father, despite knowing that he is seriously ill and he had 4 heart attacks. And knowing that he knows nothing about my activities, they took him for 3 consecutive interrogations, and the man died.
Though the regime harassed underground journalists like Urban, they could do little to stop citizens from listening to foreign radio stations which broadcast reports back into Czechoslovakia.
The Radio Free Europe actually acted as a kind of a loop. These things would be smuggled out and rebroadcast back into Czechoslovakia, so that it was almost like listening to an internal broadcast. It really, I think, had a tremendous impact in spreading the knowledge of what was going on in the dissident world.
Among the listeners was a new demographic, one that was acutely sensitive to society's contradictions and capable of destabilizing the entire country: teenagers.
No, I heard of Havel and the dissidents from my dad and from the broadcasting on Radio Free Europe.
I admired them. I thought I must learn everything that they do.
I knew reasonably well about Václav Havel. He definitely was my hero.
This young generation of the 80s, they grew up seeing stupidity of the regime.
The parents lied to their kids because they were scared that the kids might say something in the school. The teachers were lying to their students because some of the children can tell it to the parents at home and the parents can say it to the secret police. So it was a circle of the lies.
With Moscow's push for reform under Mikhail Gorbachev inspiring change all over communist Eastern Europe, young Czechoslovaks decided it was time to take action.
Probably by intuition, we decided to start the student movement because we had a feeling that the things are changing.
In August of 1988, illegal demonstrations were organized in Prague to mark the anniversary of the Soviet invasion of 1968. They were the most audacious of their kind in 20 years. During the next 14 months, several more demonstrations took place, all with the same outcome. Frustrated organizers were unable to attract large crowds. But that was about to change.
Someone came with the idea, let's try to organize the demonstration of the 17th of November.
November the 17th, 1989, would mark a historic Czechoslovak anniversary. On that day, 50 years earlier, Nazis in Prague killed a local student for his protest against German occupation. The symbolic value was enormous. Obtaining an official permit to hold a public gathering commemorating November the 17th, students hoped to draw crowds large enough to spark a revolution.
For the first time, we were going around universities and almost officially inviting people to it, saying, you can come, this time nothing will happen, you don't have to be scared, you won't be beaten.
Monika Payarova was one of several student organizers of the November 17th demonstration.
When preparing the 17th of November, we of course wanted to do it on Wenceslav Square, which is the historical center of Prague.
For Czechoslovaks, Wenceslas Square in the center of Prague was recognized as the seat of national power. If the students managed to fill the square with thousands of protesters, the regime's legitimacy could be seriously compromised.
But that's exactly where they didn't want us to go. And so the Prague authorities said, you can have a demonstration, but it will be in Albertov, which is almost outside of Prague, in front of the medical faculty, and light some candles, and that's it. We had a big argument about it in the movement. I was one of them saying, look, let's do what they want us to do. And then we just turned the march into the center of the town, and we will get to the Wenceslav Square. When we started, which was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we, the organizers, were in the middle of the crowd, so we didn't see really how many people came. And I remember when they put me up, because I was the first speaker, I suddenly saw that it was crowds and crowds of people. I never saw so many people in my life before at one place. I thought to myself, this is the first time we are that many. That's incredible. That must mean something.
I didn't know how many people would show up, and I was totally surprised that there were thousands of people.
Jan Bubenik was among the college students who assembled that day.
People kind of started to look at each other's eyes and kind of giving each other courage, and started to shout some slogans like free elections.
Understanding that their presence could cause people to suspect that the Charterists were behind the demonstration, dissidents like Václav Havel stayed away. Their young colleague Sasha Vondra, however, couldn't resist.
There was the atmosphere of happiness, and there was a moment which I remember that I told my wife, look, it looks like a revolution.
2 hours later, after a few speeches, people moved into the center of the Prague.
I think they suspected that something would happen, otherwise the army and the police wouldn't be prepared around Wenceslav Square. But I think even then they were surprised when they saw this 80,000 people marching along the river into the center of the town, exactly there where they didn't want us to go.
Though estimates vary on the size of the crowd, one thing was certain: the thousands of demonstrators would not be allowed to reach Wenceslas Square.
When we got to the crossroad in front of the National Theatre, we already had some information that people who were a little bit in front of us saw special forces, not ordinary policemen that we were used to. We were in such a euphoric mood, and we thought, we are so many, and we crossed the whole city now, and no, we won't change our plans.
We saw the crowd control police in the white helmets and the shields and the white nightsticks.
It really looked very scary. And at that point, we, the people in front, we sat down, and the whole crowd was then sitting in the street. So we started using the slogans like, we only have bare hands. No reaction from them. It was really like a wall in front of you. And then when it started, it was a complete chaos. Complete chaos.
Jan Yaran was one of the first students to be beaten.
There was a guy from these paratroopers who jumped up to me and shouted at me, well, what the hell what did you think you were doing here? And just hit me on the face, and I flew some 4 meters.
I wanted to scream, and nothing was coming out of my lungs. And I just wanted to run.
When the beating started, it was such a total chaos that they got very emotional, and that they took us as personal enemies. Like, you could see that they were beating with pleasure.
About 500 people were injured.
And even there was a report that one of those students was killed.
I suddenly was so depressed. I thought, that's it, that's the end. What can we do now? I was horribly cold, which must have been nerves, and I thought to myself, stavka, the Czech word for strike. I really heard it for the first time in my life as something that could be really done.
Organized strikes against regime policy were non-existent in Czechoslovakia. The idea that young people would initiate such a protest was considered preposterous. But not to Monika Pajarova and her fellow students.
The most important decision to go on strike and to thus start a revolution was made very easily and very quickly.
During the next 24 hours, student organizers strengthened their resolve to unleash the power of the powerless. Plans were set in motion to initiate a citywide occupational student strike. The first task was getting the word out. Without knowing that the regime's anti-riot troops had viciously beaten students, Czechoslovak citizens were unlikely to support the strike.
But it was impossible to get anything into the official Czech media.
We decided to organize kind of small groups of the students, spreading tens of thousands of the pictures, leaflets, VHS cassettes. That's why we call the first week of the strikes as a kind of an information war.
But students weren't the only ones thinking about revolution. Having assessed the situation, Václav Havel and members of the opposition knew it was time to act.
The students were meeting at their universities, and it was very, very clear that we need to react here. Basically, we met on Saturday, and then again on Sunday, and we found a name, Civic Forum.
Bylo třeba, aby ta opozice, ti disidenti, kteří tu leta existovali a měli už vytvořené své struktury a byli nějak známí doma i v zahraničí, to nemohli nechat jen jakémusi samopohybu, jakési spontaneitě, která a nakonec se budou nahnáni zpátky do škol a všechno to skončí. Cítili povinnost a bylo by i zrádné a neodpovědné, kdyby nějakým způsobem se toho neujali.
Binding various anti-regime groups together, the Civic Forum began speaking for the opposition. In their first public statement, Civic Forum demanded that those responsible for the attack of November the 17th be brought to justice.
It was not clear yet that the communist regime is over. So initially the things that the Civic Forum was coming up to were rather restricted, because there was of course always the danger that there might be blood.
Though police intervention seemed inevitable, students stuck to their plans and initiated occupational strikes.
Monday morning, I went to my natural science faculty. We went to the dean and asked the keys from him. He gave the keys, and from that moment we were controlling the faculty. And the same thing happened during the Monday morning in another 30 different Prague faculties.
Though students were now in control of various university buildings, there was no telling how long it would last. Security forces could intervene at any moment, and everyone knew how the regime treated troublemakers. In spite of the danger, Monika Pajarova, Šimon Panek and Jan Bubenik accepted leadership roles in the student strike committee.
I will never forget a phone call which I had with my parents. The phone got picked up by my mom, and she said, "You're involved, aren't you? I know that you are involved. I'm ordering you to come home now." I said, "Mom, I'm fine, I'm okay, and I cannot come." "You got elected into some committee, I know you." You know, she said, "I'm ordering you to come home now." And Dad picked up the phone and said, "You know, if you were here, I would slap you silly, but boy, I'm proud of you."
Like Bubenik's parents, thousands of